The silver serving tray felt heavier than it should. My hands trembled slightly, not from the weight, but from the dozen pairs of eyes tracking my every movement. Every clink of the wine glasses, every soft swish of the long, silky skirt brushing my legs reminded me exactly where I was and who I had become. "Careful with that, Leah," Victoria called from across the table, her voice calm but carrying that unshakable command I had come to dread, and, for reasons I refused to admit, anticipate. It was the first time she'd used that name in front of her friends. My name. Not the one I was born with, but the one she had given me, a name that didn't just sound different, but felt like a lock clicking into place. They laughed lightly, not cruelly, but in that knowing way that told me they had been briefed about tonight. They knew this wasn't just a casual dinner party. Victoria had planned this for weeks. And I had walked into it willingly, or so it must have looked. I'd met her 2 years ago at the architecture firm where I worked as a junior assistant. She was everything I wasn't: confident, wealthy, socially magnetic. The kind of person who could turn a room into her stage without trying. She'd started as my mentor. Somewhere along the way, the balance shifted. It all started the night she caught me alone in her penthouse guest room. The wardrobe door had been ajar. A gown, emerald green, floor-length, the kind of thing you'd see on a red carpet, was hanging inside. I had only wanted to touch it, to see what that kind of luxury felt like. I hadn't heard her footsteps. She didn't scold me. She didn't laugh. She just said, "Try it on." That was 3 months ago. Now, here I was, in a champagne-colored gown she had tailored to fit me better than my old life ever did, as she put it, serving a table of her closest friends in her glass-walled penthouse with the city lights burning behind us like a silent audience. "Leah, could you top up Amelia's glass?" she said now, not even looking at me. She knew I would obey. I moved beside a tall woman with a short, sharp haircut. Amelia leaned back slightly, inspecting me like she was evaluating a painting. "She's even prettier than you said, Amelia remarked, resting her chin on her hand. "You've really polished her." The others chuckled. My cheeks warmed, and I kept my eyes on the wine bottle, praying my hands didn't shake enough for them to notice. "Oh, she's not finished yet," Victoria replied smoothly. "This is just her first public performance." Public performance. The word stuck like a shard in my mind. What else did she have planned? When I finished pouring, I turned to leave, but Victoria's voice, soft, almost playful, stopped me. "Stay," she said. "I think our friends should get to know you better." A murmur of approval went around the table. I stood there, trying to ignore the fact that I was no longer background help, but the evening's centerpiece. Amelia smirked. "So, Leah, what were you before Victoria discovered you?" The question hit like a trap I couldn't sidestep. The truth that I'd been a quiet, invisible man working endless late nights for little pay didn't seem like the right answer. But lying wouldn't help either. "I was someone else," I said finally, meeting Amelia's gaze. The table laughed again, but Victoria's eyes stayed locked on mine. That was when I realized something. This night wasn't about embarrassment. It was about transformation. And I was only at the beginning. The laughter faded into a low hum of chatter, but I could feel Victoria's gaze still anchored to me like a thread I couldn't cut. Her smile never wavered, but there was something in it now, a glint of satisfaction, as if a private checklist in her mind was being ticked off. "Why don't you sit for a moment, Leah?" she said, motioning toward the empty chair beside her. "You've earned a little break." It sounded generous, but my stomach tightened. Victoria didn't give gifts without strings. I slipped into the chair, the satin of my gown whispering against the fabric. The women leaned in subtly, forming a loose circle around me without moving their seats. I was no longer serving. I was on display. Amelia rested her elbows on the table. "Tell us something you've never told anyone before." My throat went dry. I'm not sure what you mean." "Anything," another woman chimed in. "A secret. A dream. A mistake." The air seemed heavier. This wasn't idle curiosity, this was a game. Victoria's hand brushed my arm lightly, almost reassuring. "Don't overthink it. Just share." I thought of the safe answers, childhood memories, harmless quirks, but something in Victoria's eyes warned me against deflecting. "I once tried to leave," I heard myself say. Before this, before her. The table went still. Leave? Amelia echoed. I nodded, fingers curling in my lap. I packed a bag, told myself it was just a weekend away. But when I reached the elevator, she was already there. Waiting. She didn't even look angry. She just said, "If you walk out now, you'll never understand what you're meant to become." A shiver ran through me, remembering the way she'd blocked the elevator doors with nothing but her presence. I hadn't walked out. I'd never even reached the lobby. Victoria's smile deepened, but she didn't speak. "That's intense," one of the women murmured, though her eyes sparkled with intrigue. "Oh, that was nothing," Victoria finally said, her tone light, almost casual. "That was before Leah was ready. She's much closer now." I wanted to ask, closer to what? But Victoria was already turning to address the table. "Ladies, I think it's time for our little exercise." Amelia grinned. "Oh, we're doing it tonight?" "Of course," Victoria replied. "No better audience." She reached under the table and pulled out a small, velvet-covered box. My breath caught. "This," she said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver choker, "is more than just jewelry. It's a promise. And once she puts it on, there's no going back." The women leaned forward, eyes glinting. Victoria turned to me. "Leah, stand." I obeyed, my knees weak. She stepped behind me, sweeping my hair over one shoulder. The choker was cool against my skin, the clasp clicking shut with an almost ceremonial finality. "There," she whispered, so only I could hear. "Now you belong." The room seemed smaller. The women's smile sharper. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end of the night. It was the beginning of something I wasn't sure I could escape. The silver choker felt heavier with every passing second. It wasn't just the weight of the metal, it was the unspoken promise Victoria had mentioned, the way her words seemed to echo in my head. "Now you belong." The women resumed sipping their wine, but I could feel the shift in the air. Every so often, one of them would glance my way, eyes flicking to the choker as if it were more important than me. Victoria let the room settle before speaking again. "Leah," she said smoothly, "do you know why silver is worn at the throat?" I swallowed. "No, ma'am." "Because," she said, standing to circle the table like a lecturer, "it is a point of vulnerability. A place where a single touch can command attention, or control." The way she looked at me on the last word made my stomach flip. Amelia tilted her head. "Are you going to tell her, or should I?" "Oh, I'll tell her," Victoria replied, her voice almost affectionate. She returned to her seat, folding her hands. "That choker is a key. Not literal, though there is a clasp only I can undo. It's a key to a room you don't know exists yet, but soon will." A ripple of murmurs passed around the table. "What room?" I asked before I could stop myself. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile you'd give someone who asked a child's question. "Patience, darling. We'll get there." The conversation moved on, but I barely heard it. I was too aware of the cold band at my throat, the faint click I'd heard when it locked. Half an hour later, dessert had been cleared, and the women were laughing over some private joke when Victoria rose again. "All right," she said, her voice carrying over the noise. "Time for our field trip." Chairs scraped back. The women gathered their coats, but there was no talk of leaving the penthouse. Instead, they followed Victoria toward the far end of the room, to a wall I'd never seen open before. She pressed her palm against a panel. With a soft hiss, it slid aside to reveal a narrow, dimly lit hallway. "In you go," she said, gesturing to me. My pulse hammered. Where does it lead?" "You'll see," she replied, her tone light but her eyes firm. "Remember, you belong now." The women filed in behind me, their heels clicking on the polished floor. The hallway opened into a large, circular chamber lined with mirrors. And in the center, a raised platform. "This," Victoria announced, "is where Leah learns her next lesson." I stood frozen as she approached me, her fingers brushing the choker. "You've done well tonight," she murmured. "But this," she tapped the silver at my throat, "isn't just for show. It's a marker. An invitation. And there are others waiting to meet you who will know exactly what it means." The mirrors seemed to close in around me. My reflection stared back, the gown, the choker, the soft curls Victoria had insisted on. And then, somewhere in the reflection, movement, figures in the shadows. Watching. I realized with a jolt, we weren't alone. For a moment, I thought the mirrored chamber was playing tricks on me, that the movement in the glass was only my own nervous shifting. Then one of the shadows stepped forward. A tall figure emerged, dressed in a deep crimson gown, her face half hidden by an ornate silver mask. Behind her, two more followed, each wearing the same style of mask, but in different metallic shades, gold, bronze. Their presence was so deliberate, so synchronized, it felt like watching a ritual. Victoria's friends, who had followed me into the room, moved to the edges without a word, forming a silent outer ring. My throat tightened against the choker. "Leah," Victoria said, her voice softer now, almost reverent, "these are members of the circle." The woman in crimson inclined her head. "So this is the one you've been preparing?" "Yes," Victoria replied. "And she's ready for her first trial." "Trial?" The word set my pulse racing. I don't understand," I stammered. "You will," the woman in crimson said, her tone not unkind, but firm. "In our world, identity isn't just chosen, it's tested. The choker marks you as an initiate. Tonight, you will prove whether you wear it as decoration or as truth." Two of the masked women moved to stand beside me. One reached out, tilting my chin toward the mirror. "Look at yourself," she said. "Is this the person you see when you close your eyes? Or the one you've been told to be?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came. The reflection seemed to shift my face, but softer, framed by the gown's shimmering fabric, and behind me, Victoria, her hand resting lightly at my shoulder like both a claim and a comfort. The woman in crimson spoke again. "The trial is simple. You will walk the circle once, in silence. You will not break eye contact with yourself in the mirror. And when you stop, you will answer one question truthfully, no matter what it costs you." "What question?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's smile deepened. "That's for later." The masked women stepped back, leaving the platform clear. Victoria's eyes locked with mine. "Begin." I stepped onto the platform, the mirror surrounding me like an audience of 100 identical strangers. My heels clicked against the polished floor. Each step felt like it echoed longer than it should, reverberating through my chest. Halfway around the circle, I realized the reflections weren't quite accurate. In one, my lips moved when I wasn't speaking. In another, my eyes seemed sharper, almost defiant. By the time I completed the circuit, my hands were trembling. The woman in crimson stepped forward again. "Your question is this. If you could walk away right now, choker removed, gown discarded, would you?" The room fell silent. Every eye, masked and unmasked, waited for my answer. I thought about the life I'd had before. The endless late nights at the office. The anonymity. The ache of being unseen. And I thought about this, the danger, the control, the strange thrill of being someone else. "No," I said finally. "I wouldn't." The woman in crimson's lips curved into the faintest smile. "She's ready," she said to Victoria. "Proceed." "Proceed to what?" Victoria's hand found mine, warm and unyielding. "Welcome to the circle, Leah. From this moment on, there's no going back." The mirrors slid back into the walls with a mechanical hum, revealing another passage beyond the chamber. The masked women began to walk through it, their gowns trailing like liquid metal. Victoria squeezed my hand once before guiding me to follow.